We just don't agree on the justification that God is the only thing that provides morality.
It's not a justification, it's a definition.
What's the difference then?
I was under the impression I was invited to talk to a Christian. Am I not talking to a Christian? I think everyone should look at the title of the YouTube channel. You're probably in the wrong YouTube video.
You're really quite something, you are.
Aren't I? But you're really quite nothing.
A lot of people are talking about the fiasco of Jordan Peterson's performance on Jubilee, especially his exchange with Danny that I just showed you. Many reaction videos have been released, but here's why you should watch this video. I'm not just here to mock his arguments. Honestly, most of them fall apart on their own. What I want to do is different. I want to show you how to stay on track in a debate, especially when someone like Peterson starts deflecting or reframing everything you say. If you have ever felt frustrated watching a debate slip into confusion, this video is for you. My focus is on strategy, specifically how to spot when your opponent tries to sidetrack the conversation and how to bring it right back. The goal is to make them confront your position as it is, not the version they want to attack. Without further ado, let's get started.
My first claim, atheists reject God, but they don't understand what they're rejecting.
Now, some atheists might instinctively want to debate the word reject and say things like, wait, I'm not rejecting God, I just don't find the arguments convincing. Technically, you are correct, but here's the thing. With someone like Peterson, that move plays into his hands. He thrives on ambiguous language and will happily spiral the conversation into definitions until no one remembers what the original point was. And if you have followed his work, you already know he doesn't define God the way most theists do. He once said, God is the ultimate fictional character.
God is the ultimate fictional character.
Are you aware of any Jews, Christians, or Muslims who would describe God that way? His idea of God is so unique, it's in a category of its own. So why step into his little circle to fight there? So here's the strategy. Don't chase his definitions. Assert your own. Say something like this. You might define God differently, but I don't believe in that kind of God that most theists believe in, the creator of the universe, all powerful, all knowing, all loving. That's it. That's what's being rejected, not some vague archetype or metaphor. Now, Peterson might respond this way, as he did.
My experience with atheists is twofold. Is that they have a very reductive notion of what constitutes God, let's say in the Judeo-Christian tradition.
This is where you move the conversation back on track. Ask, okay, are atheists justified in rejecting that reductive view of God? Here's why that question works. If he says yes, then he's conceding the atheist's position is reasonable. If he says no, he's contradicting himself because he just said the view is reductive. It forces him to deal with your framing instead of running off with his own. If he tries to pivot again, like saying God is unknowable or God is conscious, don't follow. Just say, we are clearly talking about two different definitions of God. I'm not rejecting your understanding of God. I'm rejecting the theistic God most believers actually worship. Do you actually understand what it is that we are rejecting? This is the key move. You don't let your opponent control the definitions. You don't let them turn the debate into fog. You define your position, you stick to it, and you keep dragging the discussion back until it's your argument being addressed, not a straw man. Another reason why it's so important to stand your ground when debating Jordan Peterson is this. He constantly shifts the meaning of the words he uses. If you grant him his definitions and try to critique them, he will just reject your critique by changing the definition again. It's a moving target. And that's exactly the tactic. Nowhere is this clearer than with the word God, the central word in this entire discussion. At first, he says that the traditional Judeo-Christian notion of God is too reductionistic, and instead emphasizes that God is unknowable.
It's not a simple personification. It's not a simple old man in the sky. It's something that in its essence is unknowable and overwhelming.
Okay, so God is unknowable, but later he says,
So Elijah, the prophet Elijah, defined God in the Old Testament as the voice of conscience within. My definition of God as conscience.
Then later still, he says,
at the bottom of this hierarchy, this foundational priority in your life is going to be considered God. Is that correct?
Yes.
so now God is not unknowable. God is conscience. Or maybe God is your highest value. Or maybe God is the source of your moral system. This is what I mean by semantic fog. If you follow him into that fog, the conversation collapses. Everyone walks away more confused than when they started. That's why it's so important to hold on to what you are rejecting. You are rejecting classic theism, the idea of a personal, supernatural creator who is all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-loving. That's the God that most religious believers actually worship. That's the idea being debated. So don't let Peterson define God however he wants. Keep the focus where it belongs. Ask, should we reject that God? And if you want to press further, you can ask, are you saying atheists should believe in the kind of God you define? He might say, no, I'm saying you already believe in God, you just fail to acknowledge it. And that's when you hit back. Okay, then does that apply to you too? Are you saying that you already believe in God as well? And just wait, watch him twist and squirm and maybe even explode because he's trapped in his own game. The point is not to play by his rules, it's to hold him to a consistent standard and force clarity. Once you do that, you have already won. Of course, you can also talk like Danny.
I was under the impression I was invited to talk to a Christian. Am I not talking to a Christian? I think everyone should look at the title of the YouTube channel. You're probably in the wrong YouTube video.
You're really quite something, you are.
Aren't I? But you're really quite nothing.
Don't get me wrong, I think he's brilliant in pointing out the obvious. Why is he in a debate representing the Christian side when he refuses to acknowledge that he is a Christian? What I'm offering is an alternative way of forcing him to confront his inconsistency.
My next claim is that morality and purpose cannot be found within science.
Let's be honest, this claim is irrelevant to atheism. If I were in that debate, I would use it as a chance to clarify what atheism actually is. Because here's the thing, atheism doesn't mean we rely on science for everything. I really wish someone had gone up to the microphone and just said, yes, I agree with you. Morality and purpose don't come from science, but that doesn't make atheism wrong because atheism never claimed otherwise. And that would have been enough. We can argue all day about how atheists ground their morality, whether it's in biology, empathy, utility, social contracts, or game theory. But none of that changes what atheism actually is, a lack of belief in God. That's it. Theists like Peterson often claim that without belief in God, morality has no foundation. But atheists simply don't accept that premise. We do have a foundation for morality. It just isn't God. If I say I don't believe in God and I base my moral values on something else, that's coherent. You might disagree with my foundation, but disagreement with you doesn't mean it must be wrong. And if you are assuming that morality must be objective in a theistic sense, that's your burden to prove, not mine. So here's the challenge I'd pose to theists watching this. What arguments can you offer that actually forces an atheist to admit that God is the only valid basis for morality or purpose? I've never seen one. If you think you have one, drop it in the comments. I'd genuinely like to see it. Now, let's look at how Jordan Peterson handles this. He doesn't argue that God must be the basis of morality. He just redefines it that way.
If you're saying that morality and purpose cannot come from science, is the opposite of that true, that morality and purpose can only come from God?
That's a way of defining it, yes.
Okay.
That's right, that's good. So I would say that with regard to the first claim, say, atheists don't understand what they're rejecting, because I would say, by definition, God is the unity upon which moral claims are based. That's a definition.
I mean, when it comes to talking about how men should be masculine and things of that nature, you and I are 100% in agreement. We just don't agree on the justification that God is the only thing that provides morality.
It's not a justification, it's a definition.
What's the difference then?
And just like that, he rests his case, not by proving it, not by reasoning through it, but by simply defining God as the foundation of morality. So he's basically saying, if we are making moral claims, then you are implicitly invoking God, because that's what God means. But let's be clear, that's begging the question. He's assuming the conclusion in this definition. He says God is the source of morality. And when you ask why, he says, because that's what the word means. That's not an argument. That's just wordplay. And it's easy to flip around. I could say, by definition, morality isn't grounded in God. It's grounded in our shared human values and instincts. Would Peterson accept my definition? Of course not. So if we are just trading definitions, we are going nowhere. That's not a productive conversation. If I had been there during the debate, as soon as he made that move, I would have jumped in and asked, how do you know that God is the unity upon which moral claims are based? And maybe add, didn't you say earlier that God is unknowable? So how can you suddenly make such a specific claim about God's role in morality? Because you can't have it both ways. If God is unknowable, you don't get to turn around and make a confident declarations about what he is by definition. Either we can know something about God or we can't. And if we can't, your definitions don't help anyone. That's why these conversations get nowhere unless we pin down what's actually being claimed and call out rhetorical shortcuts when we see them.
My next claim is that everybody worships something, including atheists, even though they might not know it.
Have you noticed the pattern by now? Every one of Peterson's claims is framed in a way that subtly belittles atheists. Atheists reject God, but they don't know what they are rejecting. Atheists talk about morality, but they don't understand its foundation is God. Atheists don't worship God, but they still worship something. The implication each time, atheists are naive, shallow, or self-deluded. It's condescending and, frankly, it's designed to provoke an emotional response. But more importantly, Peterson is playing a word game again. This time, he shifts the meaning of the word worship. And once again, we are deep into equivocation territory. Let's look at what he actually says.
How do you define worship?
Prioritize. Whatever you're attending to, you're worshiping.
At the bottom of this hierarchy, this foundational priority in your life is going to be considered God.
That's
is that
right.
correct?
Yes.
So when you strip away the mystical tone and just rephrase what he said, the claim becomes everybody prioritizes something, including atheists, even though they might not know it. And suddenly, the statement goes from sounding profound to sounding painfully obvious. Like, duh, of course, everyone has priorities. That's trivially true. But that doesn't mean everyone believes in a deity. Are atheists out here advocating for people to have no goals, values, or guiding principles? Of course not. So what's the point of this statement other than to blur definitions? This is Peterson's signature move, change the meaning of a word so it no longer means what most people think it means, and then pretend he's uncovered some deep truth. It's not depth, it's distraction. And here's where this tactic really backfires.
It's not possible that you don't worship anything.
What do I worship?
Which, under his definitions, means everyone worships something, and therefore everyone believes in God, because he defined God as your top priority. But if that's the case, then Peterson himself believes in God, right? Except every time someone asks him directly, he dodges. He won't say, yes, I believe in God. He'll pivot, he'll redefine, he'll say, what do you mean by belief? This is where someone needs to step in and ask, okay, if everyone worships something, including you, does that mean you worship God? If he says yes, follow up, so you believe in God then. And if he dodges again with, well, it depends on what you mean by belief, just respond, believe as how you define it. You stake your life on it. Then see what happens. I would love to see his reaction to that, because you can't have it both ways. You can't define God so vaguely that it includes everything, and then use that to claim victory over atheists who are rejecting a very specific concept of a personal, supernatural deity. Once you spot this rhetorical sleight of hand, Peterson stops sounding like a profound philosopher and starts sounding like a guy doing semantic gymnastics. And that's really all there is to claim number 3. Let's move on to the final one, claim number 4.
My final claim is that atheists accept Christian morality, but deny the religion's foundational stories.
By this point, even if you haven't watched the whole debate, you have probably figured out Peterson's game. He doesn't really argue his points. He redefines key terms in ways so vague and inclusive that his conclusions become unchallengeable by default. And if you have guessed that he defines Christian morality as something so broad that literally everyone practices it, consciously or not, you are absolutely right. Let's watch how he explains what he means by Christian morality.
What does it mean to accept Christian values precisely, or Christian morality?
It means to aim up as hard as you can, no matter what happens to you.
Okay.
Okay?
So I think that that's a very broad definition of.
No shit, it's broad. That's the point. It's not about accurately representing Christian moral theology. It's about making the definition so universal that no one can escape it, so that Peterson can turn around and say, see, even atheists live by Christian values. That's the move. And it's not the only time he does it. He also says,
Do you believe that you can change?
I do.
Do you believe you can change for the better?
I do.
Do you believe that when you change for the better, you abandon the things you've done in the past that weren't good?
I think that you can.
Okay, then
Yeah.
that's very much in keeping with Christian doctrine.
Can you
so if you believe in self-improvement or moral growth or personal responsibility, congratulations, you are now following Christian doctrine, according to Peterson. But let's be clear, this is not an argument, it's a definition. He's not proving that Christian morality underlies atheist thinking. He's relabeling universal values like hope, growth, and redemption as exclusively Christian, and then claiming victory because atheists also believe in them. It's clever, it sounds profound, but it's just another form of equivocation, his favorite tactic. And here's what you can say if you were in that debate. Sure, those values are part of Christian morality, but they are not exclusively Christian. Ideas like aiming high, becoming a better person, or abandoning past wrongs exist in many moral traditions. They didn't originate with Christianity, and they are certainly not owned by the Christian faith. Take mindfulness. It's widely practiced and valued in the modern world, but it comes from Buddhism, which predates Christianity by centuries. Does that mean everyone who practices mindfulness is secretly a Buddhist? Of course not. That would be absurd. Just because I appreciate a moral teaching doesn't mean I accept the supernatural claims that came with it. I can agree with the value of compassion, humility, and perseverance, and still reject the idea that Jesus rose from the dead. Morality isn't a copyright claim. Good ideas can be shared, adopted, reinterpreted, and they belong to no one. So when Peterson says atheists are living by Christian values, what he really means is atheists hold to basic moral principles that happen to also exist in Christianity. That's not a gotcha. That's just obvious. And that wraps up claim number 4. Let's close this video with a few final thoughts. So what did we just witness? 4 claims that on the surface sound like challenges to atheism, but when you break them down, they all rely on the same tactic, changing the meaning of words mid-conversation. Peterson doesn't really debate. He redefines God as conscience. He redefines worship as prioritizing. He redefines Christian morality as aiming upward. And then he uses those definitions to corner atheists into positions they never actually held. That's not argumentation, that's rhetorical sleight of hand. It gives the illusion of winning without ever confronting the real disagreement. And that's why I made this video, not just to critique Peterson's performance, but to give you a framework for how to handle conversations like this. When someone tries to hijack the terms of the debate, you don't follow them into the weeds. You hold your ground. You define your position clearly. You keep dragging the conversation back to your actual point until they either address it or reveal that they can't. In other words, don't just defend your ideas, defend the clarity of the conversation. Thanks for watching. If this breakdown helped you see through the fog, give it a like, leave a comment, and share it with someone who's been frustrated by these kinds of debates. And if you are new here, consider subscribing to my channel. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.